Hello, everyone. Welcome to the C3 podcast. I'm here today with my friend Lexi as we're talking about some amazing things from her journey from sports to tech to now a founder of a great organization and talking about lessons and values she learned away there. So, without further ado, Lexi, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Hey, good afternoon. Happy Friday, Junior. Hope your week is stellar. Really excited to be here and have this conversation and build connections for your audience. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And in my usual fashion, I'm just bringing my mic closer because it's
You sound
it's
great. You
all for
sound
wood.
great. So
Okay.
don't worry. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited for today's conversation, right? I kind of did a quick overview of just your career and the things that we connect on. Again, from sports, basketball, particularly. I grew up playing basketball. I actually adore the sport to this day. Building community tech. So I'm really excited for today's conversation, but we always talk about how it's a human first podcast and human first space. So, who is Lexi as a human before we dive into all these great things that you've done and the lessons you learned?
Yeah, thank you for that. Lexi, as a human, is a former collegiate athlete, like you had mentioned, so had an opportunity to play at a few. Yeah, I don't know about I mean, I'll clap now because it's definitely Final Four season. We had some
Hey,
exciting women's basketball games going. I know, I could talk about that for hours, but no, former collegiate athlete, grew up in Forest Hills, Queens, and played at a few different universities in New York. Unfortunately, women's sports back then wasn't what it is now. And so I kind of was my own journeyman in terms of finding the perfect fit, both academically and athletically. So had an opportunity to walk on at Wagner University, go Staten Island, the forgotten borough. Yeah, definitely need to clap it up for him. But from there, I also had a chance to work in entertainment and also event production for every New York professional sports team as a part-time job. So I learned a lot around different organizations, different sports, the values of each team, and what makes a team in itself. And from there, I actually got a job in tech from throwing t-shirts at Madison Square Garden, which I laugh about all the time. So two things that probably should not be said in the same sentence, but a really unique opportunity that I'm so grateful for. But outside of all the accolades in terms of professionally, I'm a family person first and foremost. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter. And really like to think of myself as a servant leader, just always looking for the next opportunity to give back and help others in any capacity that I can. So, thank you for all the applause. I'm feeling great. Thank you. We'll wrap it up.
hey, it's important to like celebrate all the wins along the way. That's a lot of what these conversations are is about all the wins along the way. And you told me something that I didn't know. Like you're from Queens. The
No?
joke I always make is my mom was born in Jamaica and then she
Okay.
moved to Jamaica, Queens. So my mom is from Queens too. So
Love that.
she went from Jamaica to Jamaica.
Yeah, no, I tell my husband all the time, like Eddie Murphy said, you found a queen from Queens, it just worked out.
Well, I appreciate the background on that as well, and just the connections you started to talk about in terms of teaming and the lessons along the way there. If you wouldn't mind, I mean, you've kind of overview what that background is as well there professionally, but kind of double clicking what I heard is starting up from sports, doing some things in terms of covering sports and entertainment, transitioning into tech, and then now as a founder. Is that pretty accurate summary, or have I missed anything that's important
Yeah,
for us to understand?
no, pretty accurate. I think in New York too, especially like I come from a first generation household, a single family household. So I tell people all the time, I worked a lot of odd jobs that I'm not ashamed about just because it led me to so many connections, right? So even working part-time for every single sports team, it's like, oh, it was a part-time job. It's like, yes, but it was for every single sports team. Like, and throw in the US Open, ball girling for Venus and Serena Williams, like it's literally there's so many opportunities. And I think a lot of times people downplay part time work or contract
Yeah.
positions and the connections you can make, especially at a young age. Like I was so wet behind my ears and not knowing what I was doing. But now, as I'm further in my 20s and a founder, those connections are just really holding up in terms of like what I guess I was expecting. So, yeah.
I love that perspective because there's all these conversations now about like the gig economy and then like how
Gig
is it
economy.
to
Yeah.
survive on the traditional roles, right? But the
Hmm.
beauty of traditional roles that we've had here is exactly what you just mentioned, is that they build community, which we'll talk about later on in this podcast, right? Like whether you're a server at a restaurant, whether you said work at different sporting events or live events, sporting events are one of the few areas that people still leave their house and show up to meet people in person, which is ultimately
Sometimes, yeah.
community. Right? So those are the things that are slowly being lost. I think that it's great to have that experience because it's a skill that I think people are taking for granted that's becoming less and less really mastered today. So
Yeah, no, thank you for that breakdown. And I think, yeah, just it taught me a lot about speaking to different age demographics, catering to others, and just constantly being in new environments and getting those nerves out and just getting out of your comfort zone. So.
you mentioned it passively, but like Ball Girl for Venus and Serena Williams, did you do that as well?
Yeah, so there's a little, yes. So, yes, but so if you ever watch the US Open and you see a match on Arthur
Yeah.
Ashe, I'll give a little like ball person tidbit. Arthur Ashe being the biggest stadium, of course, at the
Yeah.
USTA, which is in Flushing, Queens. You'll see these boxes that a lot of photographers' lenses will come through, and it's behind the players, so behind the baseline. So a fun thing here is that they actually do station ball people in those pits, along with the six ball people you see on court. So I was in one of those pits at a match. I wasn't, I'm not fast, Myron. I know my skills. It's not running. So I was always a back. But at that time, they had a lot of backs that like historically would always do the sisters matches. So I did get to do the pit for one of their matches. I did like Andy Roddick's last match, which was really neat. But yeah, like out of a job that was like, oh, what are you doing this summer? Oh, I'm gonna be a ball girl. Okay, I will too. Like what? So yeah,
That's so amazing. Like that again, just that experience. I mean, that's an amazing seat. It's just like I
yeah.
would have been a
Oh, I
ball person just for the seat.
don't get me started on the other perks because there's a laundry list, but I enjoyed every single summer to say the least.
I think that's so important. I remember, we've talked about sports as well. It's like that's how I got into sports. I remember again, my mom moved from Jamaica to Jamaica, Queens. Like she would look at me at the beginning of the summer, like Isaiah. She doesn't call me Myron. She calls me by my middle name, Isaiah. Isaiah, you're not just gonna like sit around the house. We gotta put you in sports. What are you gonna do? Like pick from this
Yeah,
long list of things. So I literally
yeah.
try like every sports. I think basketball and soccer were the ones I love the most, right? But I mean, I played just about everything. But to your point, in the summers, it's interesting. We're getting close to summer now, and I'm seeing like the kids in our neighborhood like run around a little bit more. So it's always good to see it, but you don't see it as much as I think when we were growing up. Right? Kids are in the
No.
house on the iPad, and yeah, it's kind of sad in some ways.
Yeah, I started a crew team at my high school. I'm like, I've never rowed before. Like, and they're like, oh, you actually can only row at specific hours, meaning 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. I'm like, what did I sign myself up for, But I think like just sports teach you so much. And so
Yeah,
something I'll never take for granted. Yeah. Your mom did right.
yeah. It's I do not regret a single thing I played. I was better at some things than others. Like you said, you learn
Yeah.
your strengths and weaknesses, but the experience is invaluable.
Hmm.
Across this diverse journey you've been on, right? You've done some amazing things that we'll dive more into throughout the episode. But what have been the values that have allowed you to be successful along the way, and that you really anchor on for making your decisions on what to do or say not to, and really maximizing the potential of everything you're investing in?
Yeah, I think in short, having an athlete's mindset. So literally going above and beyond, maxing out every single rep. And now what that looks like as a founder or even working in tech is so different. But
Yeah,
having that same mindset as to I'm going to show up, I'm going to be early, I'm going to communicate loud, early, and often. I'm going to respect
yeah,
everyone as if they're the coach of my team, regardless if they're the manager or, the water boy and so forth. And so those are some values that I hold pretty close to my heart and I think helped me tremendously in tech. And I think it's really interesting. You definitely know a former athlete when you're working with a former athlete and you're like, this person is just on. What's in your coffee, And it's like, no, this is just who I am. And so I really think those values I hold true. have a lot of values of faith that I rely on, whether that's journaling or manifesting or
Yeah.
just keeping scriptures close to my heart and on my mind in terms of how I treat others and how I really respect myself and the standard I set. But yeah, I think those are probably the gist of it.
I love that. There's so much we take from sports and how we show up, right? And we can always learn. That's kind of why I started the podcast. I mean, short story is, before I actually started this, I was like getting my car worked on one day, and I was at the dealership, not dealership, I took it to like a little car shop. And I'm sitting outside, and there's like older coach, and you can tell he's on the phone with like maybe someone who just become a coach, and he was telling all these things about like, hey, how do you manage your team? How do you like have respect for each person, but also understand that people are going to sometimes be afraid to tell you some things? How do you
Hmm.
build? It's like all these different things. I was listening. I was like, at the time, it was before I moved into a leadership role in tech as I am now. I was like, dude, everything he's saying is for a sports team, but can it be applied directly into me moving into a leadership role? So I'm sitting here just like
Yeah.
on my phone taking notes while my car
And
is
who
being
do you
worked on.
coach for? Yeah.
Because like he's
Are
talking
you
to this guy on
looking
the
for
phone.
players? Yeah.
Are you looking for players? Like I would have worked for that guy. He just gave me so much free game, and I think he realized at one point I was taking notes. That I was just like leaning in,
Keep
but
going,
it's
coach.
keep going, coach. Like you're, yeah. I don't know his name, but thank you, guy I met at. It was
Oh.
Tire South. That's where I take my car. Tire South here in Atlanta. You did an amazing job of coaching me, preparing me for leadership. So
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And yeah, it's interesting too because I feel like a lot of athletes, as they transition to corporate, as they become
yeah,
parents, the way they like coach up their household or
yeah.
like their team, like when I was in corporate and tech, they're like, "Oh, what's your goal?" And I'm like, "Get my manager promoted." They're like, "Oh, because you want their role." And I'm like, "No, because I want to get my manager promoted. Like I am running through a wall for this person, you know?" So I'm sure your team feels the same way.
We've had other athletes on the pod before, and that what you just said is so important, right? It's I think for athletes, we understand like we are literally trying to have ourselves be our best
Hmm.
selves, right? And then everyone around us, really being our team or our coach, be their best selves for no other reason that we just want you to be your
Yeah,
best self. There's no other like catch to that. It's like I just want you to be the best
literally.
you, and that's
Yeah,
amazing. But that's not always shared. But it's what we bring to the table, right?
yeah, yeah.
Now you talked about transitioning into tech, right? From working in sports, working into covering sports entertainment. How was that transition for you? And then we'll talk about the founder transition shortly. But how was it transitioning to tech without having that background there?
Yeah, I will say, I was in tech for about 5.5 years, but I wasn't in revenue generating tech. So
Yeah,
very different, right? I wasn't your
yeah,
account executive. I didn't do biz dev. I wasn't in sales.
yeah.
Because I have a different level of respect for those folks. So I just want to make sure the caveat I say, because they're gonna be like, what? Lexi's talking about her tech journey. And it's like, I worked in philanthropy. Like I was different type of tech, but no, it was really interesting. I think the nice thing about tech and specifically where we had a chance to work is the opportunity for career mobility and especially getting in early on at big tech. At the early stages, I would say, when you're a 30,000 person company versus an 80,000 person company, you really get to see how decisions are made, how visions are brought to life, and how all parties are kept abreast. And so the transition into tech, I kind of did not know what to expect. I didn't come from a family that has historically worked in corporate America. So it was very much a trial period, I would say, for myself. I started as a junior in college. So I hung up my jersey actually because I received this offer from the tech corporation we had a chance to work at, and it kind of was like a just try it out, like if you've walked on to a team before and didn't know what to expect with a coach, you can definitely walk into corporate and not know what to expect, but just have those values forward facing and be present. And so it was definitely a huge transition in terms of understanding how you show up, how it's different, understanding the stakeholder and what that looks like both internally and externally and the systems and all that. But I think you just learn so fast. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things about working in tech because I think working in any other environment, you're like, oh. okay, there's time. And it's like in tech, there's no time. Like you're behind even if you're ahead, you know?
It's such
Yeah.
a thing. I mean, that's why, I mean, when I first joined tech or corporate, right? People would, I remember all these like gray haired people would show up and talk about their values. I was like, that stuff doesn't mean anything. But I think as we get older, as we mature, have these experience, like those values are so important. That's why it's talked about at the beginning of this podcast, right? Like, what are the values? Like, how do you know the filter in which you make your decisions? Because that applies to this whole priorities and there's no time thing. Because frankly, I don't
Mm.
think any of us are ever going to catch up or truly
No.
be ahead, right? But we know the priorities in which we want to make a decision. And as long as we are sticking to those priorities and those whys and those values, like that's ultimately what success in any industry or area of life is going to be about, right?
Yeah, literally. And yeah, when I transitioned, the first thing I was like, how can I learn as much as I can from as many people as I can? And at the time, I was in the New York market. So it was one of our like larger offices. It was
Yeah.
booming. It was an opportunity to be super innovative. So I was pitching like every single idea I could, and really just bringing in my sports and entertainment background too. Like, hey, we've tried this, or this gets people excited. And so I remember just having a million and one coffee chats. And then I was so nervous to like post on LinkedIn. And I remember there was a employee from our corporation that we worked at, messaged me, was like, "Oh, I love your thoughts on LinkedIn. Keep going." And I was like, "Oh, really? Like, I feel like such a little like kid compared to like senior leadership there." But it made me realize like how easily visible everyone is, especially in
Yeah.
this new age of technology where you're seeing them in office, you're seeing them online, you might see them on a different social media site.
Yeah.
And so it's regardless of a title, I think people see who you are and your values. And so now transitioning to being a founder, these same employees are volunteering for my organization. And it's like, oh, like I remember messaging employees and I'm like, not sure if you remembered me. We worked at such and such back in. And they're like, come on now. Like, of course I remember you. And I
Of
was like,
course.
okay, I didn't know, because corporations grow so fast. You transition teams, you're meeting so many people internally and externally. And it really just how you treat people is so important. And I'm so glad it's so focused on in school at an early age because the kids that do get it and stick with it, it'll help them along the way tremendously.
Yeah, yeah. I was having a conversation with a friend last week there, like during dinner, and exactly what you mentioned. Like everyone remembers how they treat, how people make you feel, right? And that's what's most important, right? Is we can look at our Facebook, our LinkedIn, whatever. We can say, "Oh, do you remember this person? This person?" And sometimes you remember more or less about them, but you absolutely remember how you felt in your
Oh,
last interaction
100%.
or your various interactions with someone, right? So that is absolutely a key, is being mindful of that.
Yeah, and especially like in corporations where career mobility is such a thing. Like,
Yeah,
I remember my first role was sitting at the front desk, welcoming people into the office. And so a lot of people, maybe they're not a morning person, giving them a benefit of the doubt, and they won't say hello, right? But then you
yeah,
transition roles, and now they need you for some KPIs that they have to hit. And they're like, oh, by the way, and it's like, okay, sure, I'm happy to help you. But,
yeah,
like, where was the same energy and excitement?
yeah,
And I think, yeah, you never know who you're actually interacting with. And same thing goes for anything, like on the subway, at a restaurant, you name it. So,
yeah, yeah. It's so funny because and again, it goes back to the team thing, right? I think that you talked about the values is like you treat every person as a person, as a human, and then you want that person to be their best selves, agnostic of whatever that title actually is.
yeah,
Um, that's such a thing, is making sure that you do that. All the great leaders I've ever worked for have always said you want to have relationships before you need a relationship, because
you
when you're
want to
knocking on the door,
network
like
before you have to. Yeah.
before you have to, because it's different saying, "Hey, I know you and I have a favor," versus, "Hey, I just have a favor." So
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Especially in today's economy, it's so hard to
yeah,
and like in terms of my transition out of tech and being a part of the tech layoffs, it was such a
yeah,
eye-opening experience as to how many people reached out immediately and were like, how
yeah,
can I serve you? Like, just tell
yep,
me how. Go ahead, I'm ready,
yep,
And it was like, wow, like I didn't even know this person knew me. I didn't know this person saw my work. I didn't, but it just goes to show like energy speaks sometimes before you can. So
yeah. it's what's they say like 15-20% less is vocal, but it's all these other different things
Right.
that communicate a lot more.
Hmm.
Speaking about that communication, as we talk about sports and lessons from sports, what were some of the things that you learned from showing up as an athlete? Right, I think you mentioned some great things that athletes show up and people are like, "Oh, what's in your coffee?" You bring so much to the table. You're trying to do a lot for yourself and for those around you. So that's a great way of communicating that leadership, of communicating that I truly believe in the team and want us all to be successful. But what are some other lessons that you learned that you think apply to tech or just now being a founder?
Yeah. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're forgotten about. Even showing up to meetings, like I know we were chatting back and forth, and I was on the
Yeah.
call 10 minutes early, just eating my lunch or early dinner, I guess, I'm like, I can't be late for Myron, just because it's like I want to show up, So that the communicating loud, early, and often, that goes for like team updates. Not sure if you saw this update. I know it was here, but I want to make sure it's visible here. And hey, I'm here if you need me. Especially in the digital age, I think is so important. Putting your teammates first. Like in college, one of my coaches used to count our high fives in practice. Yeah. So if we didn't have a certain amount of high fives, yeah, don't get me started on sports, Myron. If we didn't have a certain amount of high fives, we used to have to run. And the reason being is because she really loved Steve Nash, and Steve Nash was
Yeah.
always so focused on his teammates. And I think Steve Nash might have counted his high fives or something, and that's where
Yeah.
she got it from. But our manager used to like have a whiteboard, and I remember like specifically, and it's true, like when I'm going to give you energy and I'm focused on lifting you up, I'm not focused on my pain. Like I can't
Yeah.
be, right? Like the brain can't operate that way. And so doing that, and then also just getting your reps in. Like, especially as a founder, I remember I used to post on LinkedIn, I made my first cold call today. And people were like, why are you posting about it? I'm like, because I'm excited that, like, this is a rep. This counts towards my stat sheet. So, yeah, I think those are some of the many lessons, and just keeping a log of
Yeah.
everything. I remember when I was a college athlete, we'd
Yep.
have our like player binders. And so outside of the player binders, I used to want to write out every single workout we did in practice, just so I had to use on my own if a coach wasn't available for an extra workout. And that logging of like working out is now how I task log what I'm doing at work, right? Like what's
Yeah.
out of scope, what's in scope, what am I doing, who are the stakeholders, like what was an unplanned ask of me this week, and how has that added value to what I'm doing. So I think like documentation is huge, and body language completely. Like I remember if our hands were like above our head or on our knees or not behind your back, you were running. So anytime I'm just like, yes, like here, focused.
Oh god, there's we might have to have a second episode just for the sports things because there's
Sports.
so many just jewels that you mentioned there, right? From supporting your team, like the high fives, like making sure you're being mindful of saying thank you or good job for the people, like just investing in others,
Hmm.
right? There's you called it the notes, but I think even deeper than that is being open to getting better, right? Like how
Hmm.
often do you see people in corporate jobs like so present towards what's happening and how they can improve from it, right? And every day that's
Yeah.
sports, like every whether you're like lifting, whatever drill you're doing, the game, like you're
You
always
have
so
to
on it,
track
like
everything. Yeah.
you have to track it, and it's like okay, like how can I look back on that, and then to your point, how can I replicate that in my own time, right? So there's practice in day to day with customers, and there's like, hey, I just want to get better, so when I am live, I can show up better. And then you ended by just talking about, how we all can just continue to learn from the sports interactions there as well. So that's yeah, there's
I will
so
add one
much.
more. I will add
Yeah,
one more too. Sports are crazy. Quarterly, we used to have to do like personality quizzes and traits. And then our teammates used to have to do personality quizzes and traits. And we used to have to remember the personality type of our teammates. So we knew, like, if they're having a bad practice, here's how I can help them,
Yeah.
like, and I think like in corporate operating manuals are like such a thing now, right? Or Gen
Yep.
Z's bringing that to the table, I guess. Like, here's how I like to
Yep.
be approached. And when I'm having a bad day, you can do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's so important because we all don't cope the same way. We all don't get
Yeah.
energized the same way. You may know my work personality, but not know my at home personality. And sometimes
Yeah.
I need my teammate to understand both of those identities. So I didn't understand it then, but I do understand it now, and I love it. Like, I love a good personality quiz.
I love them as well. And that's, I mean, I'm on the sales side myself. So we do those in sales at a time. And it's so important just making sure you understand how to show up for those around you. And frankly, sometimes those quizzes change over time. You're right, depending on what
Yeah.
season of life that person is. I remember the last thing I forgot about the previous thing you said is the body language. Oh my,
Mm.
it's 15-20% at max is like
I'm
vocal.
slouching right now. Sorry.
I'm even over. I'm like Lexi. I'm like maybe I should like not put my hands over here like because you want to be just
You
present
were.
and communicate that. It's so important. So many things we can learn from sports there. So many things we learn from sports, right? In terms of lessons in showing up for others, body language, community appreciation, just being maniacally focused on how we can be our best selves and help others be their best selves. And that kind of gets us into community, right? Of helping others be their best selves. We talk about community a lot in this podcast. I feel like similar to that networking word, we hear it so often, but we're almost like desensitized to knowing to what it actually means. So, Lexi, what is community to you and why is it actually important?
In short, it's a group of people you can lean on. And lean on not just through like personal achievements, like, hey, can you share this LinkedIn post that I did? Because it
Yeah.
looks really good, but like, hey, my uncle just passed away. Like, can we talk, And people that kind of a community that, I don't know, a perfect community doesn't want anything from you. They just want to give towards you. And
Yeah.
I think that's huge. And a lot of times, what kills me is that people mention, like, I'm building community, but it's for X, Y, and Z demographic. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, but understand your community is not equitable, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's only a
Yeah.
certain part of people that can join that community. And so for me, yeah, in short, a community is people that you can lean on that want nothing from you. They just want to give towards you in terms of what you're going through, your phase in life. Really just a support system that's very genuine, authentic, and wants to see you become the best version of you.
It's exactly what you mentioned with sports about right team of making sure that we're our best selves and we're surrounded by people that we want to invest in and want to invest in us. And it's such a simple concept on paper, but we don't always see it. But when we do, we know it and we absolutely love and just appreciate it. Um, what's it been like actually building community? Because to your point, right, it can be nuanced, right? From as maybe what you were alluding to as biases, right? Sometimes people want to build a community that isn't equitable, or sometimes you want to build a community and it's not only there to support people. There's kind of like this underlying, hey, this is how we also all get paid or supported from that, right?
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think what you're
By the
building.
way,
By the way, before you leave, one ask, and
yeah,
it's like, oh, I thought we had community, but now you're asking me for.
a
Uh,
credit card community? What? This is so crazy.
it's surreal and it's always acts at the most inopportune time.
Hmm.
um how have you been able to build like actual community, right? Because what you're doing is really amazing and isn't this way that's not equitable. It's not this way that's just asking for credit cards. It really creates connection between people and benefits everyone involved.
Yeah, yeah. So we do so at Run It Back, which is my 501 that my partner and I really, it's just the two of us in terms of building right now. But we're 3 years old as an organization, serving 3,000 people across the nation. Thank you. Yeah, in 15 states and counting. So really proud of that. And basically, how we build community is by our free offerings. And we have three main offerings. It's free basketball for student athletes ages 9 through 18, and then adults 18 through 65. So we really have the space for anyone and everyone. Outside of that, which that looks like youth clinics, 5-on-5 games, you name it. Outside of that, we offer free student athlete mentorship. So, a lot of the life skills I spoke to you about in terms of cognitive thinking, time management, personal branding, high school resumes, college resumes, and applications, you name it. We have a 26-week curated curriculum where we take student athletes from either teams or schools of the communities we're a part of and pair them with former student athletes. So, adults that are a part of our program that have been former student athletes themselves and are from the same communities these student athletes are from. Because, like you said, your mom putting you in sports, my mom, I was like, okay, mom, got it. Okay, coach, and it's like, but if I had someone that looked like me, that walked through the same journey I did, then I'd probably be more receptive as to, oh, I didn't think of that, or oh, that makes more sense. So bridging the gap there. And then for our adults, we provide free career development or professional development service, offering free mock interviews, resume reviews, speed networking sessions. So really just trying to help the average 18 through 24-year-old or wherever you are in your age demographic get out of the service and labor industry and understand that there's a role for you in corporate. And a lot of roles don't even require you to have your college degree anymore. And
Yeah.
so introducing you to different industries and seeing what's possible and pairing you with corporate professionals in your same neighborhood so you can grow your network of opportunity of individuals and everything in between. So that's how we build community on paper, I would say, in essence. But outside of that, we're there for our community members at all hours. I remember community members have come up to us and said that like it saved their mental health in terms of things they were facing, or maybe they haven't played basketball or had a free opportunity to engage in sports since we've last hosted an event in their city. And so I think building community is showing up for others and just offering a space. As we look to like grow our team and our organization, we're always asking about like hiring staff. And it's like, of course, we'd love to hire staff, but we're still at a novice part of our organization where I'm not going to expect someone else to do the work for free that I so deeply care about and do for free
Mhm.
just because I care. I want to offer that
Yeah.
same level of respect. So, um, showing up for our constituents, offering them opportunities at each activation we have. We hire local content creators, so photographers and videographers, to expand their portfolio, to get in front of new clients. We've had photographers or videographers come kind of just practice their craft, and now their craft is getting sent to the North America brand director at Nike because they're interested in a campaign. And it's like, that again shouldn't have even been a thing, but it is a thing. And so a lot of our photographers and videographers have actually gone from hobby to profession just from using our community as like a soundboard and an opportunity. And so it's been really interesting to see. I remember one of our constituents who was a photographer wanted to shoot for a professional sports team. And I was like, just tell me the sports team, send me the job posting. They were like, okay. I'm like, I'll find someone that's in our community, maybe that knows the person. And I did. I found the hiring manager. I messaged them, was like, can we get on a call about this role? So I'm telling them about the role and how excited I am. They're like, is it you that's looking for the position? I'm like, no, no, no. They're like, wait, so this isn't an employee of yours? I'm like, it is. It isn't just you need to hire this person and this. So basically, they hire them, and literally within a year, went from contractor to full time to now like director of producing content for this team. And it's like literally just the people, like, it kills me that people are such like gatekeepers in some ways. And it's like there's so
Yeah.
much opportunity, there's so many salaries, there's so many platforms where we can all succeed. And I truly believe like good givers are great getters. We don't do the
Yeah.
work that we do in order to receive, but rather we
Yeah.
do the work that we do to hopefully inspire you to help someone else as much as we've helped you. And
Yeah.
so in essence, I think that's how we build community. It's definitely a lot on the heart. People don't understand that nonprofits don't actually have real ownership, right? So I can say I'm a founder, but at the end of the day, I'm actually reporting to our board, and the board can
Yeah.
decide what's what. And besides no ownership, a lot of times it takes a nonprofit a few years to actually see profit, for the organization. And the rules behind like 501c3 nonprofits and all are actually really interesting in terms of how you can spend your funding. And long story short, there's like no salaries a lot of times.
Yeah.
You're doing the work because you care so deeply about it and the individuals you're helping. And so, like seeing individuals come to our sporting events just to play basketball, and then they end up with a corporate job at Barclays, and they're one of seven siblings, and now they get to tell their siblings, well, maybe you should stay in sport because it offered me an opportunity that I would have never received before, you know? So, yeah, I'm gonna cry now, but I love our community. I really do. Yeah.
Oh, it's the mark of, I don't want to say authentic community because you shouldn't have to put authentic and community in the same thing, but it's
You
true
do
community.
now. You have to, yeah.
And again, some people watch, some people listen. Like, you're actually like impacted by just talking about it, which lets us know how much you're invested in, and generally get fulfillment from what you're doing. So
Oh
just
man,
thank
yeah.
you.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for creating a space to share. We just did an event in Indiana for a charter school that was in downtown Indianapolis, like 5 minutes
yeah,
away from where all the activations were happening. And
yeah,
thankfully, we were able to give back to the entire fourth grade. So 75 students. We did a vision board party. Yeah, it was great. We had an on-court activation. They have been a school for 20 years, but just got a gym last year, which is crazy. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, were playing in PE and Crocs and just like
yeah,
not the right equipment. And so they were gifted like head to toe gear from like a Nike affiliate brand. And I remember after the session, they take their clothes off to change back into their school clothes and they go, "Here, miss." And I'm like, "No, no, no, like this is for you. Like you can keep it, you know." And it's just like, kids that aren't helped frequently don't understand that there are people that want to help them, unfortunately. And if
yeah,
that doesn't open your heart in terms of giving back and really helping those within the communities that you may hear about but not necessarily see, then I don't know what will, because like that just, I could not believe it. Like, I just, yeah, it was, yeah.
I'm gonna start crying here soon as well. Seriously, because I can picture it.
Oh, I'll send
You
photos, don't worry.
please send photos because I'm gonna be crying. Like, oh my god.
They're really cute kids, yeah.
You said some interesting things, right? I think one in the connection what we started the conversation off with is how much economically things have changed since when we were kids, right? And I say it to
Hmm.
say we talk about this trade professions, these service professions, right, and how that's different for people who work those jobs today. Um, it's different for kids not just being involved in tech and being on the iPad, but I was very aware growing up that basketball was to some degree, I'm using PC language, an urban sport
Hmm.
where today, to your point, maybe it's sad that schools don't have gyms. Kids aren't always playing basketball, and I'm just using basketball because it's what maybe you and I are really familiar with. It's just so different, right?
Hmm.
And there's barriers to entry for something that I think we grew up loving, and now see it's harder for kids to play. So when you tell that story about kids maybe playing basketball for the first time or in a long time and having the gear, it's like that may have been easier for us as kids. Where now it's rarer for many reasons, and I hope kids can just play basketball, right?
Yeah, or like it's costing the same price as your mortgage. Like, since when did sports have to be that expensive? Like, it's so
Yeah,
unnecessary. And that's why, like, we'll take on the cost of all of our programming. And the first 3 years have
yeah,
been extremely difficult because we're too novice of an organization to really apply for some grants, or some
yeah,
grants are looking for programming that's happening every single day, catering to the same amount of students every day. And we're not a
yeah,
YMCA. We don't have one specific location. And we do that on purpose because we're serving
yeah,
such a wide demographic. We're serving the average student athlete under the age of 18. We're serving the working parent that may be in their mid
yeah,
20s, mid 30s, wanting to still be active and give back to their community. We're serving the post college student that's really not sure where they are in their career, but maybe can come some days on their off days from work. And so it's not a rinse and repeat. Even when we have engagements repeated in the same states that we serve, it's always in a different borough or a different city. It's always in a different gym. Like, we want it to be new, refreshing, and exciting and give you the same feeling that you had when you were a student playing the game. So,
yeah.
yeah, so many things that can hopefully be fixed in sports. So we'll see.
There's many answers and values and just principles foundationally in sports, and I think one of them that I hear you say, you haven't said the words, but I process as I listen to you, is just that theme of giving people the opportunity to do something, and then also letting them know you believe in them. And
Mm,
there's an episode, a couple episodes back now, by the time this airs, of that's just everything. I was talking to a friend, and he builds community as well within tech and Black Orlando Tech. That my friend's name is Josh, and he's in the episode. He's like, a part of my job was just letting people know they have a space to show up, meet people who are going through similar things to what they're going through, and someone just to say, I believe in you. And I think that in sports, we grew up maybe hearing people hopefully saying, I believe in you to make that shot or like make that play, and it helps us all be successful. But it's amazing, again, in corporate or just general life, how few times you have these spaces where people are just saying, I'm going to provide you an opportunity. And I believe that when you get that opportunity, you're going to be a great and or okay. That
yeah.
doesn't happen nearly enough, and that's what I think you're providing for a range of people across different segments, ages, backgrounds, what have you.
Yeah, because unfortunately these days you're hearing the opposite and the negative
Yeah,
connotation of it all on social media first before you can even live
yeah,
the experience. And it's, yeah.
yeah. In terms of in-person events, I know before we pressed record, we were laughing about this. I adore that you're focusing on in person, because it's, I think, for the clearest form of community, right? It's also something you have to do to show up, which is a whole psychological thing, right? And it shows that people actually care and want to be there. Joke I was going to make before we press record is like, even with album sales, right? A couple weeks ago I was getting my haircut, and I'm a big Outkast fan. And I hope I don't talk too long about this, but I adore Outkast. Grew up playing basketball,
It's
listening to Outkast. Like,
Atlanta, you know,
it's
it's
Atlanta. Come
fine.
on. Like, there can be no one higher on my Mount Rushmore
Hello.
than Big
Yeah.
Boy and Andre Three Stacks. I
Mm.
love his new album, and I saw Big Boy in Costco a few weeks ago, and that's adulting 101, and I almost cried. Uh,
What Costco?
yep. Yeah, I almost cried. I have a picture too, but anyway, I'm just saying that to say that Outcasts, right? They created these very real, authentic albums, and they used
Yeah.
real, like real instruments. And it was during the '90s where people showed up in person to events and concerts. And I've seen, and I won't say names now because it's not to go too far to the entertainment route, but you see artists today who will get Grammys or get certain awards,
Hmm.
but then cancel their tour because they can't get people to show up. So when you compare the numbers, the stats of everything that happens online and streaming and just anything you consider digitally, to the fact that, Lexi, what you're doing is getting people to come outside their house and show up in person and do something. Like, that is the ultimate. No matter how you measure it, numbers, stats we put towards it, I'm seeing more and more that if you get people to show up in person, that says something you almost really just can't measure, right? So,
Yeah.
what
And I think even
how's
on
that
the
been for you?
corporate side, yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say even on the corporate side too, it's even a bigger like yes, because people aren't even showing up to office, right? Like unless
yeah,
there's like a badging policy or a
yeah,
I need to be there because X, Y, and Z. I mean, in-person events are always tricky. I do
yeah,
say we get better attendance, of course, with most of our events being in person, but I also think
yeah,
considering we don't have events every single day for the most part, there will be some times where it's a campaign week and we will have events every single day. People know if I'm not there, I'm missing the opportunity. It's not like the
yeah,
opportunity is going to repeat itself tomorrow or next week, maybe. Like this might be my one and done for the month. And I think that helps, right? Like give a little, take it back, get
yeah,
people excited and make sure they show up. But attrition always kills me, especially because a majority of our events are usually for the first 20 people that sign up. It's kind of like a
yeah.
sneaker release, but on the safer side, right? Where like you're just going online, and yeah, signing up. And so, but the thing is that some communities, like our New York community, has grown to over 400 members. I think it's our largest like state community. So when an email gets sent, like within the first 10 minutes, like those 20 spots are filled. So if we
Yep.
do have one person, and especially when programming is free, I feel like it's hard to hold your constituents accountable. So
Yeah.
we've like implemented an attendance policy where if you're taking a spot away from someone that probably needs this essence of community, then unfortunately you can't come to the next session we're hosting in your city, even if you're the first
Yeah.
person to sign up. So it is difficult. I also think in-person events, especially in the nonprofit world, being early on, like it's not going to be a red carpet event, right? I
Yeah.
might just
Yeah.
have some chairs between you and the constituent you're speaking with, and maybe that's all we're working with. But I think like the connection, the community, the energy that's in the room and the reasoning you're there is so much more important than any banner or graphics or ooh ah element is that I can show. But a lot of people sometimes don't get that, especially depending on your industry. You're expected
Yeah.
to be like, I don't know, if I offer volunteers a cookie and a water bottle, like a customized cookie, I'm like, oh, I did a great job. Like they have their information, they have a little treat, but like, of course, I want to be able to provide every volunteer like
Yeah.
t-shirt from our organization and all the things, but like unfortunately budget doesn't always allow that. And so I
Yeah.
think like if
Yeah.
you're attending a nonprofit event, especially if it's in person, like be gracious. Like they're probably hosting more than one event in person at that same time probably, and there's only so much that they can provide, and attrition happens on both ends, whether that's students, volunteers. So like if you were supposed to meet with a student one on one, but now you're meeting one on four, like be open to that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think flexibility is asked both ways.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that just because, again, nonprofits are, close to my heart. I work in the nonprofit tech space, right? And as you talk about just, I love that nonprofits have missions. There's no other way for me to say that because like I'm big on why in life and just everything I do. And it's always great to work with an organization that knows their why. And it's clear from the person who's the founder all the way down to the person who's, I'm just here for 2 hours on a Saturday for about like that type of continuity teaming is important. We know why we're
Yeah.
here and what we're trying to accomplish. And I even compare that priority perspective with you talk about the different layers of events, right? It's like you have nonprofits who have bigger budgets versus smaller budgets, but it's about why you're there. You're providing community, you're providing a way for people to connect and know that this is a pathway and get a bunch more when they even leave the event, right? To where they could
Right.
go in life. And if it's providing that, then there's going to be places that have different amount of resources that get lost in translation because they're not focused on that priority.
Yeah, and I think it's so hard. Like, I constantly have to say, like, because the student is underserved, you may not see
Yeah.
that they are underserved. You might not
Yeah.
like, and that goes over a lot of volunteers. And it's like, well, what do you
Yeah.
mean? And I'm like, because you're tuning in from Portugal, and I'm grateful you're here for the virtual opportunity. These students might be sharing a bedroom, and
Yeah.
not that there's anything wrong with that because there isn't, but you need to step out of the reality that you currently have as a ex person, at certain age working a corporate job, and meet this 14-year-old or 12-year-old where they are, and try to even imagine like what you were like back then, or what students are like now, especially with all the changes in the world. And it's like it's so important too to give that caveat, or to really like prep the volunteers. And like I hope a
Yeah.
lot of nonprofits are prepping the volunteers, because there's
Yeah.
such a wall that needs to be broken down. And every city demographic is so different. Students from different boroughs are different,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of meeting the student where they are versus meeting the volunteer where they are. And I think the focus always has to be on that constituent.
We need a whole, I mean, we need a second episode for sports and we need a second episode for nothing more than connecting people. Because I think that's what we try to do on
Yeah.
the podcast. But to your point that it's interesting connecting people with different backgrounds, perspectives, just different truly experiences of life. And how do you do that? I know we're getting close to the end. The last question I'll ask before we kind of get to the C3s and values is motherhood. What have been your
Mm.
lessons from being a new mom and being in motherhood? Congrats, first and foremost. But
Thank
that's a big
you.
thing. So, how have you learned and evolved from being a mother?
Yeah, I will say, My experience is really different. I didn't think I was going to lean into both entrepreneurship and motherhood in the same year as a novice, obviously, for both. And my husband's an entrepreneur as well. So having an entrepreneurial household is definitely different in terms of parenthood, both the pluses and minuses. But I think if motherhood has taught me anything, it's have more empathy. You're like, oh, well, I've extended the olive branch or I've tried so hard. And it's like, no, like you can have even further empathy for that
Yeah,
person or, further grace or, yes, they joined 2 minutes late. Is it really worth like a write up or, like
yeah,
just you don't
yeah,
know what they're facing? Um, and yeah, just empathy, I would say. Time, when someone gives you their time, it's like, wow, like you really, thank you for your time because it's so valuable. It's so
yeah,
valuable. And outside of that, it's just like there's nothing more important than family and whatever that looks like for everyone, whether that's just like you and your relationship with your spouse, or you and your relationship with yourself, you and your relationship with the family you came from, or you creating a new relationship with someone. Um, there is nothing more important. And people always ask, like, oh, do I wish things would have gone differently in terms of my journey? And like, because unfortunately, I feel like women are always like, oh, is it career or is it family or, and I'm so thankful that my situation panned out the way it did because I had an early opportunity to be in corporate at a young age and build my resume for the 5 years or so that I had a chance to be in that space. And now being a mom, I don't feel like I've missed anything. And I think a lot of it is because of the community, because how I treated the external stakeholders, because how I treated my colleagues. Like opportunity is there because I was super present in those moments, because I cared about how I treated others, because I cared about the extra opportunities, employee resource groups I could be a part of, and so forth. So now it's just like a time to be selfish and really soak all of it in, I guess, it's definitely a lot. There's no job like it. And yeah, it's a journey. No one day is like the other. And it's kind of like entrepreneurship too. You never know what you're going to get the next day. So
that's the beautiful and scary part.
yeah,
The beautiful and
yeah.
scary part.
I've never been so
uh,
scared in my life, but yeah,
but it's also the most rewarding thing you can do as well. Right? It's
yeah.
I appreciate just the conversations of motherhood, and I know before we hopped on, and before previous episodes, I always ask, "Can I ask about that?" Right? And it's important that we have more conversations. I hope this is a safe place to have these conversations as well. As like it's very much different today being a mother. But to your point, you're able to be a mother and be an entrepreneur, and there's no way that you need to hide that, right?
Oh, it's my
And
whole personality now. Yeah,
thank
I was
you.
actually gonna wear a shirt that said mom, but I didn't know what the business attire was for today.
Hey, you could have showed up with a mom shirt. I would appreciate it. Like I mean, it's so important, and I just hope that more mothers talk with more mothers, and people who aren't mothers talk. I mean,
Oh, yes.
it needs to
And
happen
there's
more
nothing,
because
yeah. I was gonna say, I don't mean to cut you off. There's
you're
nothing
good.
wrong with educating and sharing your experience, even with those
Yeah.
that have no interest in becoming parents, or, because
Yep.
I feel like it's such a, do you have kids before I talk about it? And that doesn't have to be of a conversation. What I do think needs to happen is you have to be empathetic and understanding and realize the things you're
Yeah.
saying. Like, people may not have a relationship that look like yours, people may
Yeah.
not be in a protective environment that's like yours, and people might not have the same accessibility to healthcare and resources like you do. So when you
Yeah.
do speak about these things, I think you have to keep that in mind, but by no means should you not share about your experience or share the ins and outs or share like, like there's just a million and one conversations about it. It's like, okay, I'm a working mom, but I hate saying
Yeah.
working mom because dads don't say working dads. There's just a million things. And like, yeah, I think like those conversations are so important. Like, what kills me the most too is like I saw so much when I was in corporate, parents coming back from parental leave, and immediately they would say congratulations. And it didn't dawn on me until I was a parent that maybe that's not how we should start the interaction unless I specifically know that you had a safe delivery, your child
Yeah.
has arrived safely, you're healthy,
Yeah.
they're healthy, your family's okay, you know? But really
Yeah.
starting on the how you're doing or the personal component, I think is
Yeah.
really probably where we should start. Because there's so much that goes into a person's health predicament and situation, and it happens so fast. And yeah, but parenthood's great. I love it.
I just hope we talk about it more. I think there's a lot of things that we can work on with the culture and the conversations around it, the language, how we kind of handle it, but it's just
Hmm.
not talked about enough. And I think with people being aware of the conversations and not afraid to have it, like we all get better from. I've learned a lot just from some of the moms I've had on the podcast so far. So I love to ask the question for another reason than the fact I know there's a lot I don't know about it.
Oh,
And I want to be able to learn and have that as a safe space. So thank you for sharing that with us.
yeah. Thank you for creating the space.
As we wrap up, we always have our C3. So my personal values have been clarity, connection, and co-creation. So kind of quick hit on each one. Clarity. How do you help others around you find their why? Right, especially as we're talking about everything from working in tech. It's kind of cool when you're in sports because everyone kind of has a similar why most of the times. But working in tech now as a founder, right, working with volunteers, it can sometimes not be clear about why this person is doing what they're doing. How do you help people find that?
Yeah, I think asking the seven whys,
Yeah,
something that our coaches always did too. Like, well, I was driving that way. I thought they were gonna, and it's like, well, why did you think that? Is that what the like, Well, because
yep.
they're, and one of our volunteers did that to a student recently, and the student came up to me and they're like, all they did was ask why. And I was like, do you know why they asked? But having this, and the student definitely thought we were just like messing with them. And we're like, no, like actually sit with it for a second. But yeah, asking them, they're asking the seven whys, but also asking
Yeah,
like what motivates them. If there was one thing that they can only do for the rest of their life, what would that thing be? Or what excites them the most, what gives them the most in terms of energy and just like eagerness to do something,
yeah,
because I think one, your why can always change. What you want to do, what's important to you can always change, and there's nothing
yeah,
wrong with that. I tell students all the time, I went to so many different universities, and their question is like, why? Well, because I originally thought I was going to go to this tier 1 school or X, Y, and Z because I wanted to be out of state, and my why changed. I wanted to stay home. I wanted to be close to family. I wasn't ready for that jump. Um,
yeah,
so I think always helping them like give a map of things in terms of like the values that play into their decision, what their future has always looked like mentally, and if they can even envision the next step as to what's to come and what they want. Because a lot of times I think we get stuck in the fog of it all of like, can't, I don't really know what the next thing is, and that's okay too. But at least having that conversation and opening up for dialogue.
oh man, I love that focus on the balance of the now and also knowing later. And that's almost episode in itself. We gotta have another episode, I think. Because that
Are you
is so
asking me to be a
important.
co-host now?
At this point, it might just need to happen because it's like, oh, like I was just talking with somebody about this morning. Like that's the difference between knowing someone who just is there to process their experience. I go to therapy for 6 or 7 years, or ask for therapy if I just only understand what the now is, but no thoughts of later. And if you have someone
Yeah.
who only thinks about later, it's like, well, are you committed to actually getting there if you're not aware of where you're at now? So you have to be to balance both, and understand the whys from that.
Mhm.
Connection, community is a big part of this, but how do you provide connection for people? Because especially with everything we talked about this episode, right? Things have changed with tech. People showing up to in-person events happens less, and you're doing it really well. But people kind of have this iPad on my phone, I'm connected to people thing. But how do you actually build a real connection, especially with what you've talked about, where you're bringing people from different backgrounds or experiences or ways of life together, and they're coming in with, I may not even, understand anyone that's here, but they end up leaving with that.
Yeah, I think it's about fostering conversation. A
Yeah.
lot of times we have more in common with others than we think. And so
Yeah.
finding that immediate commonality, I think a lot of people are so used to, because of the social media era, like looking
Yeah.
at someone based on what they post on their feed or how they dress. And it's like, well, that person always wasn't like this, you know?
Yeah.
So understanding the similarities before focusing on the differences, but also making connection easy. So knowing that
Yeah.
we're in the digital era, all of our events, we share contact information for everyone that's came. Like, I know there's only 20 individuals here. You might not have had the chance to be so and so's teammate, but here's an opportunity to stay connected. Well, why should I stay connected? Well, you don't know where this person is in their life, and chances are you may be on a similar path and can actually help each other. And it's actually a very easy way to make connection and a really great opportunity to see where you two can lead each other. You
Yeah.
know, we just had a volunteer event in New York, and two of our volunteers are like, we went to the same college and studied the same major and work at the same place and didn't even know each other. And I was like, see, like sometimes you get a reward for showing up, you know? So, yeah, I think making connection easy and offering multiple ways for people to communicate or continue that conversation is huge.
Lastly, is co-creation. How do you figure out a way to really get someone from point A to point B, right? You know, a lot of what you're providing for those that you serve in your communities there, and even volunteers, is like helping them get to this future state, right? But it's one thing to kind of make that prescriptive, right? You don't maybe get all the buy-in you want to, right? But it's good to kind of co-create that and make sure you have a clear path for them to get to where they want to go. How do you kind of think about that and hold people accountable for moving along that path?
Yeah, you can't make people want to be successful, unfortunately, right? So I think just providing the tools and resources, and a lot of times we always tell students, like, you do not have to be here. But if you are here and you're showing up, this is what we're asking of you, and this is why we're asking it of you. So I think always providing the reasoning as to why you're interested in even co-creating something and where this
Yeah.
can lead to, but also just sharing your story and like if you had this tool or if you had this mentorship, like how your trajectory could have changed. And I think a lot of times you don't realize the tools you were missing until your journey in that component has finished. And so
Yeah.
being able to find students in that moment and in that opportunity that they can have a different trajectory if they were provided X, Y, and Z, it's really special. And I feel like sometimes in those moments, you don't realize how you're co creating or how you're even speaking and the dialogue you're using, but you
Yeah.
just are because you're sharing it from your heart and your experience. And you're like, no, just know that you need this, you know? So we just, yeah, we don't make it mandatory. And I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing too, understanding like you're not forced to be here. If you're not wanting to be here, then we understand and let's try to find another way to re engage.
Well, so many jewels that you dropped, Lexi, here in terms of
Thank
just
you.
your values, your path, the impact you're making on the communities that we're all a part of. And thank you for being here and sharing that with us. You've given so much to us from your perspective. What can we do for Lexi? How can we give back to you or give back to Run It Back? What acts do you have of our listeners here?
Yeah, thank you for the space first and foremost. But yeah, a follow on social media goes a long way for our organization. So you can find us at We Run It Back or just Run It Back on LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, you name it, Facebook, all the pages. Outside of that, signing up to join our community as a volunteer, a corporate volunteer, maybe just someone that's involved in basketball that wants to give back, telling a student athlete about our organization or your friends. And if your corporation allows for donation matching and you win a prize at work and are looking for a nonprofit to donate to, definitely check us out. Our full name is We Run It Back Corp. So on those giving sites, that's what you'll see our entity as. But yeah, there's always more than one way to give. And so even if it's not Run It Back that you're supporting, just know there's many ways you can give to organizations you're in awe of. So
That was We Run It Back on most socials there, or Run It Back, I believe, on as well for some. Um, thank you, Lexi. I appreciate the conversation, the gems you dropped, and just the guidance for us. And again, we may have another episode soon, but thank you for the episode today.
yeah, thank you, Myron.
Awesome.